Welcome to this presentation on PACE financing for commercial real estate companies. My name is George Caragior, Senior Fellow with PACE Now. Today's presentation is entitled Money is Often Misunderstood. The purpose of this presentation is to remove confusion about how the cost of PACE financing compares with the cost of internal capital allocated by companies to energy efficiency and renewable energy projects. We will review the concepts of weighted average cost of capital, hurdle rates, and allocated costs of capital. After your review of this information, you will be able to explain how PACE financing can generate free cash flow from projects for which a company would not normally allocate its internal capital. Let's start with a typical reaction to the cost of PACE financing. Because the cost of PACE financing, that is the interest rate, is typically higher than a company's cost of debt, the objection noted on this slide is not atypical. What we will see over the next few minutes is that the objection is a red herring, or something that distracts people from thinking about the real issue, which is the real benefits of PACE financing. You see, comparing PACE financing with corporate debt rates is like comparing apples and oranges. Indeed, when the CFO talks about the cost of debt, he or she is referring to the cost of corporate debt, not the cost of money allocated to a project or project financing. PACE financing, on the other hand, is just that, project financing. What's the difference? Well, let's see. Let's first look at what corporate capital really is. Corporations typically raise money from two sources: investors in the company, equity, and lenders to the company, debt. Some companies are highly leveraged. In other words, they have a lot of debt relative to the amount of equity provided by investors. Others are not. Regardless, the true cost of capital is the weighted average cost of the two sources of capital. In the example on the slides, the company debt to equity ratio is 1. In other words, the company raises 50% of its capital from shareholders and the other half from lenders. The cost of equity is based on the market risk premium above the return from an investment considered free of credit risk, say a government bond. This premium is needed to compensate investors for taking extra risk by investing in stock versus a risk-free investment. In this example, the cost of equity is 12% and the cost of debt is 4%. The true cost of capital for this company is 8%, which is the weighted average cost of capital. The formula shown on this slide can be used to calculate the true cost of capital to the corporation, regardless of its debt to equity ratio. So if a corporation's true cost of capital is 8%, is that the cost that should be compared to the cost of financing from PACE? Not really. And let's see why. The reality is that corporate capital is not infinite. Every department in a company fights for it, some more successfully than others. Capital is allocated to the proposed projects based on corporate priorities, perceived risks, and many other factors. The bottom line is that only very rarely is the weighted cost of capital the hurdle rate that projects must meet. Often, energy efficiency and renewable energy projects must have simple paybacks that are as short as 3 years. Sometimes, simple paybacks between 4 and 5 years are acceptable. If these criteria are not met, the corporation will simply not allocate capital to the projects. The projects will not be funded. In other words, these projects must have internal rates of return, called IRR, between 15% and 31% over 10 years. For the sake of simplicity, let's use the middle number, 4 years simple payback, or a 21% IRR requirement. A 21% IRR requirement means that a corporation will not allocate capital to a project, that's called project financing, unless the compound rate of return on the investment is 21% over a 10-year period. In other words, use our example, if the corporation's true cost of capital is 8%, it will still allocate funds to a project at an effective cost of 21%. To summarize, in our example, a company can raise long-term debt at a cost of 4%. Its true cost of capital, however, includes its cost of equity. In our example, the weighted average cost of corporate capital is 8%. Because of corporate priorities and perceived risks, the cost of capital imposed on energy efficiency and renewable projects is 21%. That is the orange that must be compared with the 6% cost of financing. So there we have it. The cost of a 20-year PACE financing is 6% versus a 21% cost of allocated internal capital. Rationed internal capital is probably a better word. What does this mean from a practical point of view? Because thumbing your nose at a CFO and telling him that, or her, that he or she is comparing apples with oranges would not be productive, to say the least. What will be compelling to the CFO, however, will be numbers. So let's use a realistic example to show the power of PACE financing. The project described in the slide is typical of many energy efficiency projects developed by hardworking sustainability officers. With the exception of lighting projects and a few other technologies, many projects just don't pass muster with CFOs and don't meet the required hurdle rate to be funded internally. Like many energy efficiency projects, this project will not be funded and will not be implemented, at least not until operational problems make the investment inevitable or absolutely necessary. But what if this project were funded with PACE financing? A $200,000 financing for 20 years at a 6% cost of capital translates to an annual PACE assessment of $17,500. With annual savings of $35,000, implementing this project with PACE financing would generate $17,500 in free cash flow for the corporation. For a real estate company with a capitalization rate of 5%, the cash flow from the project would increase the value of the property where the project is implemented by $350,000, and with no investment of internal capital by the company. Similar projects implemented at 100 locations would increase the value of the company by $35 million. Now, that is music to a CFO's ears. So the next time someone tells you that the cost of PACE financing is an issue, just pull out this presentation and show them the numbers. Informed customers will conclude that they should use as much PACE financing as they can get.